What have we learned about the LA Kings through 3 games? That and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love for you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we're on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years. 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network. I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 18 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Coming up on today's show, we're going to preview the Kings' next game in Toronto, and we have news on a possible shakeup for the Kings' blue line. Details on that coming up. But we start with the LA Kings through 3 games so far this season. They've played 3 of this season-long 7-game road trip so far, and it's been an interesting first 3 games. 2 bad periods in Buffalo before rallying to beat the Sabres 3-1. Solid game in Boston, but losing to the Bruins in overtime 2-1, and then the Kings playing a weird game, lots of offense, no defense, a Thanksgiving Day holiday game in Canada, and losing to the Senators 8-7 in overtime. So what have we learned about the LA Kings through 3 games? Well, probably not much. It's early. Teams are still sorting things out. If you look at the NHL standings, and we'll take a quick look at the Pacific Division standings coming up in a bit, you will see teams like the Hurricanes and the Avalanche and the Oilers in dead last in their division. And if you don't know it, all those teams made the playoffs last year, and they're all considered to be legitimate Stanley Cup contenders this year. So again, it's early. You don't want to overreact to anything positive or negative necessarily, but that doesn't mean that we can't give our opinions on what we've seen so far while also acknowledging it's early. Especially for a team like the Kings, who are getting acclimated to a new full-time head coach. They've got some new players, both from outside the organization and from within the organization. They've got players that have been with the team but are now playing different roles, and everyone is getting accustomed to new strategies. So far, though, the Kings have had 1 solid game, an overtime loss, 1 bad game, a regulation win, and 1 wacky game, an overtime loss. So what have I been encouraged so far about the LA Kings through 3 games? Well, let's start with Anze Kopitar, the LA captain in his 19th NHL season, and there's always concern about a player of his age dropping off in production as he gets older, especially if he's centering your top line. Well, the 37-year-old future Hall of Famer has had a 3-goal game in Buffalo and a 3-assist game in Ottawa. He is leading the team in goals and points and just 1 point off the league scoring lead. Now, obviously, Kopitar's not going to keep this pace up, but he's also obviously off to a great start and has shown no signs at this point of that he's slowing down. Kopitar is the unquestioned leader of this team, and him playing well will go a long way in the Kings playing well. So I'm optimistic about what we've seen from the captain so far. From the oldest player on the Kings roster to a couple of young Kings, let's start with Alex Laferriere. The 22-year-old has started his 2nd NHL season playing on the Kings' top line with Kopitar and Adrian Kempe, a promotion for him after being more of a bottom 6 forward in his rookie year. Now, there was concern that Laferriere might not be ready for this kind of responsibility, but so far, he has not looked out of place at all. He had that great play on the forecheck where he stole the puck and set up Anze Kopitar for the big tying goal against the Sabres, and then a 2-goal game against the Ottawa Senators, showing some really nice skill overall. But it seems like he has embraced this opportunity. It seems like he is fitting in very well on the top line. And remember, this is a player who has surprised us before. Not a lot of people, including me, thought he had any chance of making the Kings roster last season, much less playing in 81 of 82 games and being a pretty good contributor. Alex Laferriere looking more and more like he could be more than just part of the Kings' success. He might be a key component of it. And Alex Turcotte. He has looked strong so far in limited minutes playing on the fourth line. I think if you look at who have been the two Kings players or the Kings players that have shown the most energy and jump when they get on the ice, I think it's definitely Alex Turcotte and Quentin Byfield. Now, I have seen some chatter about Alex Turcotte not getting enough minutes because he's playing on the fourth line and he should be getting more ice time and perhaps he should be promoted to a more prominent place in the lineup. And I understand that opinion, and I won't even say I disagree with it. But I think at this point, let's hold off on making any roster moves or lineup changes. I think let's give it a little more time to see what we've got. I know some might have wondered if Turcotte should not be on the top line over a guy like Alex Laferriere, but obviously at this point, Laferriere has shown he deserves to be on that top line. If you're going to move Turcotte up in the lineup, I would say the most likely candidate to be replaced, if you want to call it that, is probably Tanner Jeannot on the Jeannot line. Now, if that was the case, Jeannot would move down to the fourth line, and then you would have to see somebody like Akil Thomas inserted in the lineup to play center in place of Turcotte. And I don't think that necessarily would be a bad move, but I just think let's give it a little more time. I like what I've seen from Alex Turcotte. I get that people would like to see him get some more minutes, but let's let him earn it. Let's let it play out a little bit and see how it goes. Again, I don't think it's something that necessarily needs to be made right away, but as the season goes on, if we continue to see all that energy and that jump and that ability from Alex Turcotte, then yeah, I think that we will see him moved probably up in the lineup. What might I be too concerned about at this point? And again, it's early, but Jordan Spence has looked overwhelmed at times, replacing the injured Drew Doughty on the team's top pairing. He's been muscle off the puck at times, something I didn't see much of last season. And he has just looked, well, not ready for that spot. And oh, by the way, he isn't ready for that spot. He's been forced into this position because of the injury to Drew Doughty. And I think he definitely deserves more time to try and fill that role as best he can. We have some news possibly, though, on this coming up. And, look, nobody on the Kings' right side, any of the right-handed shots, are ready to fill the shoes of Drew Doughty. So no matter who you put in that spot, it's going to be a drop-off. Now, I had said at the beginning of the year, I thought Brant Clark was more suited for that role, probably more mentally than anything. And Kyle Burrows, he's not a guy who's ready to fill that role. So I get it. There's no great answer at this point. But I have to admit, I'm a little concerned what I'm seeing from Jordan Spence, and there may be a change coming up next game. We'll talk about that a little bit later. What am I just not sure about at this point? Well, the penalty kill was lights out the first two games, and I like the way it's more aggressive. I like this new penalty kill style. But then they got lit up like a Christmas tree in the game against Ottawa, allowing 4 power play goals. So I think it's going to be good. I think the PK is going to be a strength of the Kings, but I'm not totally sure right now. And I got to say the same about Darcy Kemper. I think he's going to be okay. And through 2 games, he was fantastic. But then the game against Ottawa, he was Swiss cheese. And again, I think he's going to be okay. I don't want to overreact to just one game. But look, anytime you allow 8 goals in a game, that's a little bit concerning. And we know he lost his starting job last year in Washington. So hopefully we see the Kings defense and Darcy Kemper bouncing back against the Toronto Maple Leafs. We'll talk more about the matchup coming up in just a second. That is, if Kemper is in fact in net, there is some question about that, and not necessarily because of the game against Ottawa, but I will say a little bit concerned right now about the PK and about Darcy Kemper. I think they're both going to be okay, but that game against Ottawa was, whoa, what's going on there? We are going to have a scouting report on the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Kings' next opponent, and also look at what we expect from the Kings or hope to see from the Kings in this game against the Leafs. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And of course, FanDuel is there for you to bet on Major League Baseball's postseason. Game 3 of the NLCS coming up on Wednesday with the Dodgers in New York to take on the Mets. Series tied at 1-1. The Dodgers are favored by 1.5 in Game 3, and the over-under for the Dodgers-Mets is 7.5 runs. Dodgers are a plus 80 to win it all. Join FanDuel. Browse the latest betting odds of your favorite sports and teams on the Sportsbook app and get in on the action. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. So I said going into this 7-game road trip at the start of the season, I felt if the Kings could get 8 points, I'd consider that a pretty good road trip. Well, through 3 games, they're halfway there. They've got 4 points. So 4 more games to get 4 more points. And it starts Wednesday in Toronto, game number 4 of this 7-game road trip. And if you don't follow the league, the Toronto Maple Leafs are basically like the current Dallas Cowboys. They are a talented team, probably get a lot more attention than they deserve, and they always kind of find a way to blow it in the playoffs. We talked about the Buffalo Sabres, and they're the longest current NHL team as far as a playoff drought, 13 years since the Sabres have made the playoffs. Well, the Toronto Maple Leafs hold the distinction of the longest drought between Stanley Cup Finals appearances and championships, 56 years and counting for Toronto. As for this year's Leafs team, they check in with a record of 2-1. They lost their opener in Montreal to the Canadiens 1-0, and since have posted back-to-back wins, beating the Devils on the road 4-2, and then knocking off the Penguins also by a score of 4-2 in their home opener. Like the Kings, the Leafs are learning to play under a new head coach. Craig Berube, who guided the St. Louis Blues to their only Stanley Cup title, is now the head coach in Toronto, hired this offseason. You might remember he was a guy that I had actually hoped the Kings would hire as their next head coach after they fired Todd McClellan and before they promoted Jim Hiller to the role full-time. Berube is a hard-nosed coach, and he's looking to bring a winning attitude to a team that is obviously hoping to win it all. Now, on the ice, the Leafs are led by superstar Austin Matthews, who led the NHL with 69 goals last season. However, he has yet to score a goal this season. Hopefully, he will stay goalless for at least one more game. Toronto has a strong group of very talented offensive players. In addition to Matthews, they've got William Nylander, Mitch Marner, and John Tavares. The Leafs have started the season with an interesting situation in net. They have had to go with number 2 goaltender Anthony Stolarz. He has started 2 of the 3 games so far because the expected number 1 goalie Joseph Woll has been sidelined with a lower body injury, and expect Stolarz to be in net against the LA Kings. Speaking of the net, what are we looking for the LA Kings in this game against the Maple Leafs? Well, first and foremost, a much better defensive effort and better goaltending from Darcy Kuemper. The Ottawa Senators had a easy time entering the zone, skating through the neutral zone, and getting to very high quality scoring areas. Now, the Leafs are a much more talented offensive team than Ottawa on paper. So that is a concern. Now, it is possible that the Kings actually don't go with Darcy Kuemper in this game against the Maple Leafs, but not necessarily because of what happened in the last game. The Kings are playing their first of back-to-back games this season. They've got the Maple Leafs on Wednesday and then the Canadiens the next day on Thursday. Obviously, Kuemper is not going to play in back-to-back games, so will we see Kuemper against the Leafs or number 2 goaltender David Rittich and then Kuemper against the Canadiens? For what it's worth, Kuemper in his career is 3-4 against Toronto, a 3.15 goals against average, and an .882 save percentage with 1 shutout. The last time he faced the Leafs was last season, and he lost, allowing 4 goals on 17 shots. In his career against Toronto, David Rittich is 3-1, a 2.44 goals against average, and a .929 save percentage. The last time Rittich faced the Leafs was in the 2020-21 season when he was a member of the Calgary Flames. And in that last game, he allowed 4 goals on 30 shots to take the loss. He was then traded shortly thereafter to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, if Jim Hiller decides to go back to Darcy Kuemper against Toronto, I think that would be the right move. That's what I would do if I was Jim Hiller. I want to send a message to the team and to Darcy Kuemper. I'm not going to sit him at the first sign of any trouble. He was excellent the first 2 games, and I'm going to show confidence in him by believing that the real Darcy Kemper was the guy we saw the first 2 games and not the guy we saw in Ottawa. Plus, after a bad defensive game, I expect the Kings to be much better defensively against Toronto. Some numbers to throw at you in this matchup. LA Kings against Toronto Maple Leafs. Again, super early. But the Leafs are the 5th best team in the NHL defensively. They're allowing 1.67 goals per game. They're not known for their defense, but that's the case so far. The Kings are 9th in the NHL as far as goals per game at 3.67. The Kings are the 5th most penalized team in the NHL with 44 penalty minutes. We've talked about this. This is an issue, especially in that game against Ottawa. They had 2 undisciplined bad penalties, one from Kevin Fiala, one from Kyle Burrows. A lot of the other calls, frankly, have been a bit ticky-tack. Sometimes we see that early in the season from officials because they kind of want to set a tone. And I would say, honestly, even though there have been too many penalties committed by the Kings, a lot of them have been, I don't want to say acceptable, but stuff like a guy stepping on Brant Clark's stick and he gets tripped. I mean, that's not anything careless or stupid. That's just bad luck. And some of these calls, again, I think they're a little over the top to start the season. I expect as we go along that will subside a little bit. But so far, the Kings, like I said, 5th most penalized team in the NHL. The Toronto Maple Leafs are very talented offensively, but so far, no power play goals through 3 games. They are 0 for 9 with the man advantage. And much like I hope Austin Matthews continues to be scoreless for one more game, let's hope the Maple Leafs are 0 for on the power play for one more game. Max Domi is leading the Leafs right now in points with 3. We talked about Anze Kopitar, 6 points to lead the Kings. Kopitar also leading the Kings in goals with 3. William Nylander, Mitch Marner, and defenseman Steven Lorentz are tied for the league lead or for the team lead in goals each with 2 for Toronto so far on the season. Face-off between the Kings and Leafs will be at 4:30 p.m. LA time on Wednesday. You can watch the game on Bally Sports West and listen on ESPN 710's app. And we will have a post-game recap after this game coming up for our Wednesday show. So again, with these early Eastern time start times, gives us a chance to give you a post-game reaction pretty much immediately right thereafter for you to listen to either the night of that game or early the next morning when you're going to work or when you're at work. We won't tell your boss. As for the game against Toronto, we are going to see a little bit of a different lineup as far as the LA Kings defense. We'll give you the details on that. And also what's going on in the Pacific Division. We'll update you on that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey guys, sometimes intimate moments happen spontaneously, and we always want to be ready so we can perform in the bedroom. Hims provides access to treatments that can give you that boost of confidence so you can be ready whenever the mood strikes. Your sex life is important, but your schedule is busy. You don't have time to go to a doctor's office to get treated for ED. Through Hims, you can get a personalized ED treatment without stepping foot outside your door. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis, and they're generics for up to 95% cheaper. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compound products, which are not approved by or verified for safely or effectively by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if it's appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Prices vary based on product and subscription plan. I did want to update you on a couple of things involving the Kings defense. Veteran defenseman Joel Edmondson has left the team. According to head coach Jim Hiller, Edmondson has, quote, gone back home for family reasons, end quote. Obviously, don't know any details on that, but hope everything is okay with Joel Edmondson and his family. But he has left the team. Obviously, don't know how long he's going to be gone. I think it's probably reasonable to assume maybe he's flying from Toronto to LA or maybe somewhere else. I don't know where he's from as far as his extended family, but pretty reasonable to assume he won't be available for the next couple of games of the Kings playing back-to-back nights. Maybe he rejoins the Kings when they return to Southern California for those final 2 games against the Ducks and the Golden Knights. But again, Joel Edmondson has left the team, family reasons, and we hope everything is okay for Joel Edmondson in that regard. So he's obviously not going to play against Toronto, likely won't play against Montreal. As far as what went down in practice today, according to Kings insider and friend of the show, Zach Dooley, Andreas Englund and Caleb Jones are looking to be the defensemen that will move in to that spot on the third pairing on the left side in place of Joel Edmondson. Obviously, Andreas Englund has the experience, having played virtually every game last year in that third pairing on the left side. Caleb Jones, a newcomer to the team, came over in the offseason, but he's a guy who has NHL experience as well. A little bit better of a puck mover, a little bit better of a skater than Andreas Englund, but not nearly as physical as Englund. And I know a lot of people, I've said this before, a lot of people, for whatever reason, are down on Andreas Englund. I don't get it. He's reliable. He's big. He's strong. He's physical. Yeah, he gives you nothing offensively, but then again, neither does Joel Edmondson. So we'll see. We'll see what the Kings decide to do. I would be surprised if they didn't go with Andreas Englund, but we'll see. As far as also some news from practice, according to Zach Dooley, the person that was skating on the third pairing with Andreas Englund and Caleb Jones was Jordan Spence, and obviously talked about it earlier on this episode, concerned about what we've seen from Jordan Spence so far. And as I mentioned, I had thought that Brant Clark was the guy who should have been promoted to the top pairing. Well, today in practice, it was Brant Clark skating with Mikey Anderson on that top pairing. Now, I don't know why Jim Hiller would make this move in practice and then not follow through with it during the game on Wednesday. But of course, we won't know for sure until the Kings take the ice against the Maple Leafs. But we know Joel Edmondson is out. It's going to be Andreas Englund or Caleb Jones filling in on the third pairing. And we suspect Brant Clark will be playing on the Kings' top pairing defensively with Mikey Anderson. All right, what is going on? We talked about it being early, and it is. But what's going on with all the other teams in the Pacific Division so far? We're going to take a quick early look just to get you updated if you don't know what's been going on. But right now on the top of the standings in the Pacific Division, you've got the Vegas Golden Knights and the Calgary Flames are tied for the division lead going into Tuesday's action. Both of them have 6 points. The Flames are 3-0 on the season. As far as our LA Kings, they check in third place with 4 points. Then you've got the Ducks, Canucks, and Kraken, each with 2 points. San Jose Sharks have 1 point. And the Edmonton Oilers are dead last in the Pacific Division. No points, 0-3 on the season, all regulation losses. Now, unfortunately, the Oilers also got off to a really slow start last year, and then they ended up making the Stanley Cup final. Of course, they also fired their coach to kickstart that turnaround. I'm guessing they're not going to do that again, but who knows? Maybe they'll bring Jay Woodcroft back. I think he's still under contract, but the Oilers obviously have very high expectations. Maybe it's just a bit of a Stanley Cup hangover getting off to a slow start. I will say I've enjoyed seeing the Oilers be at the bottom of the standings in the Pacific Division. I'd love for him to stay there all year. Don't think that's going to happen. Wishful thinking. I assume at some point they'll get it going, but it is what it is at this point. The Edmonton Oilers, last place, no wins in the Pacific, and I'm okay with that. All right, for you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, again, coming up on tomorrow's show, Wednesday show, because of the early East Coast start time, 4:30 Pacific time, we are going to have a recap of the Kings Maple Leafs game tomorrow, and then the next day as well, on Thursday, 4 p.m. Pacific time start time in Montreal. So after that game, we'll have a post-game recap and analysis show as well. And of course, on Friday, it is our usual Kings fan feedback show. Any thoughts you have about the LA Kings, we'd love to hear from you. The email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. And as always, you can leave your comments on the YouTube episodes if you're watching as well. We appreciate that. It helps out the algorithm, I'm told, for people to find the show. So appreciate that. We'd also love you to stay interactive with the show by following us on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you so much, as always, for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We will talk to you tomorrow. And as always, Go Kings, go.